At 23:35 on November 14, 1942, radar operators in the plot room of USS Washington watched green phosphorescent traces bloom across their SG radar screens. The traces represented Japanese warships approaching through the darkness. The bombardment force would reach firing range in less than 30 minutes. The American task force faced a critical night. The Japanese had no functional fire control radar. Their ships relied entirely on optical rangefinders and the exceptional night vision of their lookouts, refined through years of training. In darkness, Japanese naval gunners could only engage targets they could physically see. American ships equipped with radar could detect, track, and fire on targets that remained completely invisible to the naked eye. That technological advantage decided the battle for Guadalcanal. The stakes were high. For 3 months, American Marines had clung to a precarious foothold on Guadalcanal, a steamy tropical island. On August 7, 1942, the Marines landed and seized a partially completed Japanese airfield discovered through aerial reconnaissance. Renamed Henderson Field after a Marine aviator killed at Midway, the airfield became the focal point of a brutal campaign. Control of Henderson Field meant control of the airspace around Guadalcanal. Control of that airspace meant control of the sea approaches. Control of the sea approaches meant the ability to reinforce and supply ground forces. The Japanese understood this perfectly. They had tried to destroy Henderson Field for months, sending bombers from Rabaul during daylight and warships to bombard the field at night. American forces defended the field desperately, flying patched-together aircraft against overwhelming odds, rationing ammunition, and burying their dead in the tropical heat. The campaign had already cost thousands of lives on both sides. Naval battles around the island were savage. The waters north of Guadalcanal earned the grim nickname Iron Bottom Sound, named for the dozens of ships resting on the seafloor after night battles. American cruisers Vincennes, Quincy, Astoria, and others sank in August during the Battle of Savo Island. More ships were lost in October and early November. Bodies floated in the water. Oil slicks miles long marked where ships had burned and sunk. The smell of death hung over the area. The mission was to prevent the Japanese from adding Henderson Field to the list of destroyed targets. This required radar operators to execute flawlessly, trust in electronic machines over instincts, and translate glowing screen patterns into accurate firing solutions fast enough to save 1,200 American sailors from Japanese shells. Washington's radar operators had trained intensively since the ship entered the Pacific Theater in September 1942, arriving at Tongatabu on September 14. The SG surface search radar was so new that formal Navy training programs were still developing. The first SG radars went to sea in April 1942, just 7 months earlier. Production models were installed on ships as fast as Raytheon and other contractors could manufacture them. Operators learned from technical manuals written by engineers who had never been to sea and practiced during convoy escort missions protecting Marine reinforcements bound for Guadalcanal. The SG radar represented a revolutionary leap in naval technology. It operated on 10 cm microwaves, part of the S-band at frequencies around 3 GHz. This was far more precise than the older CXAM air search system on Washington's main mast, which used 1.5-meter wavelengths. The longer wavelength CXAM excelled at detecting aircraft at long range but produced fuzzy returns from surface targets. The SG's shorter wavelength produced sharp, distinct returns that resolved individual ships. Under ideal conditions with calm seas and clear weather, the SG detected large surface targets like battleships at 18,000 yards, more than 10 miles. It tracked multiple contacts simultaneously, painting each on the circular cathode ray tube as a distinct green blip. Most importantly, it saw through total darkness and heavy rain, conditions that rendered Japanese optical equipment nearly useless. Japanese lookouts had exceptional night vision cultivated through training and vitamin A-rich diets, but human eyes could not penetrate total darkness or see through rain squalls. Radar could. The radar system had critical limitations. It could not identify detections. A destroyer and a battleship produced similar returns at long range, appearing as identical green blips. Land masses like Savo Island created radar shadows and blind spots. Heavy seas generated false returns mimicking ships. The system required constant interpretation by operators who understood both technical characteristics and naval tactics. One misidentified contact or incorrect range estimate could lead American ships blindly into withering Japanese gunfire. In November 1942, no comprehensive doctrine existed at the Naval War College for radar-guided surface combat. No major fleet action had used radar as the primary fire control means rather than visual sighting. The technology existed and proved in limited engagements, but institutional knowledge of effective use did not. Experienced admirals had commanded radar-equipped ships in previous battles around Guadalcanal days earlier. Both were killed. One commanded from a heavy cruiser with excellent main battery firepower but poor radar antenna placement. Radar-equipped ships were positioned toward the rear of the column, where superior information could not reach quickly through jammed voice radio circuits. In the brutal 40-minute engagement starting at 1:48 on November 13, critical tactical decisions relied on fragmentary visual reports and guesswork while radar operators on other ships watched enemy maneuvers on screens. Accurate information could not reach in the chaos of close-quarters combat. Shells from battleships high in Kirishima struck the bridge, killing the admiral. He received the Medal of Honor posthumously. Another admiral performed slightly better at the Battle of Cape Esperance on October 11 to 12. The task force included ships with new SG radar. Crews detected the approaching Japanese force first, gaining tactical advantage. However, radar contacts were not fully trusted. Hesitation occurred, waiting for visual confirmation, losing critical seconds. The battle devolved into a confused melee at close range, decided more by fortune and Japanese mistakes than systematic use of American technological superiority. A shell struck the bridge on November 13 during the same battle, killing the admiral. He also received the Medal of Honor posthumously. Both demonstrated exceptional courage, leading from exposed positions. Their deaths proved courage without knowledge was insufficient. Possessing radar meant nothing without understanding how to exploit it. In November 1942, almost no one in the United States Navy fully comprehended integrating radar into surface combat doctrine except one officer. Advocacy for radar integration began in 1940 while serving as Director of Fleet Training. Participation occurred in Fleet Problem 20 in February 1939 in the Caribbean, where experimental XAF search radar aboard Battleship New York detected destroyers at 15 nautical miles. Foiling simulated torpedo attacks. Advanced warning made traditional night attack tactics obsolete. Fire control theory was studied extensively, mastering ballistics, trajectory mathematics, and electronic systems. Countless hours were spent in radar plot rooms, learning hands-on what equipment could do, its limitations, correct interpretation of returns, and distinguishing genuine contacts from atmospheric interference and sea clutter. Other flag officers viewed radar as specialized equipment for enlisted personnel and junior officers. Radar was understood as a revolutionary weapon system to master personally. Naval historians later noted more knowledge of radar capabilities and limitations existed than most operators. Tactical implications and strategic potential were understood better than any flag officer in the fleet. This expertise earned command of Task Force 64, two battleships USS Washington and USS South Dakota, for destroyers for screening, no cruisers, no air cover, no reserve forces. The South Pacific Forces commander scraped together everything left after 3 consecutive days of brutal combat around Guadalcanal. The Japanese arrived with their most powerful surface force yet. The bombardment force centered on fast battleship Kirishima, a Pearl Harbor veteran, supported by heavy cruisers Atago and Takao, light cruisers Sendai and Nagara, 9 destroyers, and enough Type 93 long lance torpedoes to sink every American vessel in range. The objective remained Henderson Field, the dirt airstrip American Marines captured in August. Japanese aircraft from Henderson Field devastated resupply convoys and provided close air support to Marines ashore. Destroying Henderson Field through naval bombardment would collapse American control within weeks. Supply convoys could not reach the island. Marines would be isolated, outnumbered, overwhelmed. The 6-month campaign, thousands of casualties, would be lost. Strategic initiative in the Pacific would shift back to Japan. The mission was simple and seemingly impossible: stop them. Complete tactical freedom was given to maneuver and fight as judged best. No micromanagement, just results. Success continued the campaign and maintained the foothold. Failure lost Guadalcanal and resumed the Japanese advance. At 22:30 on November 14, Washington's SG radar detected contacts bearing north-northwest at 18,000 yards. The radar plot identified 2 columns making 21 knots toward Savo Sound, approaching on schedule with Japanese patterns. Information reached the bridge within seconds through a redesigned communication system. Standard practice had radar operators report to a talker, who relayed to the bridge officer, who informed the admiral, who issued orders back down the chain. The multi-step process consumed precious seconds as enemy ships closed range and prepared to fire. Traditional procedures were bypassed. The radar plot officer wore a headset connecting simultaneously to the gunnery officer. Main battery plotting room, and each of 3 main gun director stations. Contacts were described instantly with position, bearing, range, and movement to everyone needing fire control solutions. No delays, no misunderstandings, no data lost in stress. The system violated peacetime regulations and standard procedures but was implemented because information speed determined survival in radar-guided combat. The bridge stood beside the commanding officer, a 50-year-old ordnance expert who spent years at the Naval Proving Ground developing fire control systems. Thorough understanding existed of ballistics, trajectory calculations, shell time of flight, and integrating radar data into firing solutions. Close collaboration developed Washington's radar-directed gunnery procedures during workup training after entering the Pacific. The crew drilled relentlessly on radar operations and fire control coordination whenever schedules permitted. This was Washington's first combat engagement. The main battery had never fired at an enemy target before this night. Words were spoken: "Well, stand by. Here they come." Throughout Washington, an electronic bell sounded 2 short rings, signaling main battery preparing to fire. Crews scrambled to rehearsed battle stations. Damage control parties positioned near critical compartments, ready for flooding or fire. In the radar plot room, equipment was fine-tuned. The SG radar painted clearer returns. Multiple contacts resolved into groups as range closed. One Japanese group moved east of Savo Island, light cruiser Sendai and 3 destroyers. Another approached from the north, light cruiser Nagara leading 6 destroyers. The main bombardment force, battleship Kirishima with heavy cruisers Atago and Takao, steamed directly toward Henderson Field down the strait between Savo Island and Guadalcanal. The Japanese force had no idea an ambush waited. Reconnaissance aircraft detected American ships earlier that day, but intelligence reports were contradictory. Some thought cruisers and destroyers, others suggested carriers. No one identified 2 modern American battleships correctly. Confusion was understandable. Japanese planning did not anticipate American battleships in restricted, reef-studded waters around Guadalcanal at night. Doctrine taught battleships needed sea room to maneuver, evade torpedoes, and maintain clear fields of fire. Savo Sound was narrow, treacherous, surrounded by reefs, strewn with wrecks. Water was contaminated with sunken ships, magnetizing compasses erratically from thousands of tons of steel on the seafloor. Sailors called it Iron Bottom Sound. It seemed terrible for capital ships but perfect for radar-guided ambush. At 23:17, Washington's radar detected Japanese screening forces at 14,000 yards. The 4 American destroyers leading the column, Walk, Benham, Preston, and Gwynn, opened fire with 5-inch guns, engaging the destroyer screen protecting the main force. Within minutes, battle descended into chaos. Japanese destroyers launched Type 93 Long Lance torpedoes, the most advanced in the world. American destroyers maneuvered frantically to avoid unseen tracks. One Long Lance struck Walk, the lead destroyer. The warhead blew off the bow and detonated the forward magazine. Walk sank in minutes, taking most of the crew. Preston took multiple shell hits from destroyers and cruisers, exploding in flames. Benham's bow was blown off by a torpedo, though the after section floated. Gwynne, the only relatively intact survivor, withdrew escorting crippled Benham. Battleship South Dakota, steaming behind Washington, suffered catastrophic electrical failures. Before 23:30, improperly secured circuit breakers failed under shock from own turret firing. At approximately 23:30, cascading failure disabled radar systems and fire control computers at the worst moment. Power partially restored at 23:58, but additional failures occurred from continued firing shock. For critical minutes in the decisive phase, the crew operated blind, unable to see enemy ships on radar or control guns through the system. Failures compounded by navigation error. South Dakota passed close to burning destroyer wrecks. Japanese searchlights from cruiser Atago illuminated the silhouette. Nearly every Japanese ship shifted fire to the target. South Dakota absorbed 27 hits from 14-inch and 8-inch shells. Japanese magazines loaded high-explosive shells with impact fuses for shore bombardment, not armor penetration. Shells devastated superstructure, knocked out radar antennas, wrecked fire control, shredded communications, killed 39 crew. But they failed to penetrate the main armor belt, protecting vitals. At 0:12 on November 15, the ship could no longer contribute effectively. Permission to withdraw was requested and granted immediately. South Dakota withdrew south, crew fighting fires and repairing. Washington was now alone against the entire Japanese force, later described by historians as a one-ship task force. Washington maneuvered carefully on the disengaged side of flaming destroyer wrecks, using fires as screen while South Dakota drew attention. Japanese, fixated on the illuminated target, failed to detect Washington in darkness. Radar operators tracked every Japanese ship precisely. At midnight, SG radar showed Kirishima at 8,400 yards, point blank for 16-inch guns. Effective range for fire control was tens of thousands of yards. At 8,400, missing was hard, radar tracking data issued the order. All main battery directors acquired targets on radar bearings alone. Mark III fire control radar fed range and bearing directly into analog computers in armored plotting rooms. Computers calculated trajectory. Adjusted for ship and target motion, compensated for wind and density, computed flight time. 9 16-inch guns in 3 triple turrets trained toward unseen targets. Everything relied on radar screens and machines. No visual confirmation, no searchlights betraying position, no verification except firing and observing results. At exactly midnight on November 15, Washington opened fire. The night erupted in flame. 9 16-inch shells, each 2,700 pounds, left barrels at 2,600 feet per second. Muzzle blast knocked sailors off feet on deck. Shells arced through darkness toward Kirishima, invisible at 8,400 yards, tracked by radar. Flight time, 7 seconds. Multiple shells struck forward section. Bridge exploded. Forward 14-inch turrets silenced, crews killed or stunned. Armor-piercing shells penetrated deck, plunged deep, exploded. Forward magazines flooded to prevent detonation. Hydraulic systems for rear turrets failed. Steering wrecked, forcing slow circle to port. Fires erupted throughout superstructure. Washington fired 75 rounds of 16-inch armor piercing in 7 minutes. American observers estimated 9 hits from splashes, but many struck short, continued underwater, slamming hull below waterline unseen. Japanese damage control recorded 20 major caliber hits. In 1992, marine archaeologists discovered Kirishima's wreck with deep-sea submersibles, evidence confirmed about 20 16-inch hits. Washington's secondary battery added 107 5-inch rounds, about 40 struck superstructure, shredding pagoda mast, destroying fire control, killing personnel, starting uncontrollable fires. Japanese officers on Kirishima's bridge struggled. Muzzle flashes seen, impacts felt, damage reports flooded, magazine flooding, forward fires, steering failure, engine room taking water. But no enemy was visible. No searchlights illuminated. No visual sighting identified position. The American battleship fired in darkness with an unknown weapon system. Return fire ordered, but fire control could not acquire target. Optical rangefinders needed visibility. Lookouts reported flashes but could not determine range or bearing in darkness and smoke. Guns fired blindly for luck. 14-inch shells passed over Washington's superstructure, missing narrowly but missing. The engagement was one-sided. Washington saw Kirishima perfectly on radar. Kirishima saw nothing. It was fighting a ghost. When Japanese gunners thought position located from flashes, Washington maneuvered using radar data on gun training, staying ahead. Japanese fired high explosive for shore bombardment, less effective against armor. Washington's armor-piercing penetrated and detonated inside. Many short shells hit underwater where armor was thinner. Catastrophic flooding ensued. Kirishima had excellent compartmentation but could not survive 20 16-inch armor-piercing hits at point-blank with near-perfect accuracy. By 0:30 on November 15, Kirishima was finished, dead in water, listing 18 degrees to starboard, fires blazing, magazines flooded, over 212 crew dead or dying. Steering control lost, circling helplessly. Japanese destroyers Asagumo and Samidare tried towing, but damage too severe. Flooding uncontrolled, list increased. At 3:25, abandoned ship ordered. 1,198 crew rescued by destroyers before Kirishima capsized and sank in Iron Bottom Sound, 7.5 miles northwest of Savo Island, adding 27,000 tons of steel to the seafloor wrecks. The bombardment mission failed completely. Without Kirishima's heavy gunfire to crater Henderson Field's runway, the operation was pointless. Remaining ships withdrew at high speed. Torpedo spreads launched at Washington for cover missed. Washington evaded using radar to track wakes and calculate courses. Pursuit avoided due to possible submarines or ambushes. The battle ended. Henderson Field saved. Marines received supplies. The accomplishment echoed through the Pacific War and reshaped naval warfare. For the first time, radar fire control achieved decisive victory in major surface engagement against a determined enemy. Technology properly employed overcame numerical inferiority and traditional advantages. Within weeks, every Pacific admiral wanted radar-equipped ships and trained operators. Urgent directives accelerated radar installation on every combat vessel. Training programs established at Pearl Harbor, West Coast, and Hollywood, Florida. Radar operators became critical combat personnel. Combat Information Centers, CIC, evolved from lessons learned. Before, radar information scattered, operators reported to bridge, gun directors separately. No central analysis location. By spring 1943, ships retrofitted with darkened CIC rooms deep inside, concentrating radar displays, radio, plotting tables. Officers saw full tactical situation, correlated sources, provided comprehensive battle picture. Revolutionary, commanders saw friendly and enemy forces, tracked movements, predicted intentions, issued orders on complete information. CIC spread fleet-wide. By 1944, every American warship had CIC with trained officers for interpretation, air defense, fighter direction, navigation. CIC became the nerve center, as vital as bridge or engines. This innovation from radar use at Guadalcanal gave insurmountable advantage in later battles. Psychological impact on Japanese forces was decisive. For 2 years post-Pearl Harbor, Japanese dominated night combat with superior training, optics, aggressive tactics. Lookout spotted first in darkness. Type 93 long lance torpedoes sank from over 20,000 yards. Tactics closed rapidly, exploited maneuverability and firepower. Victories included Savo Island devastating American forces, for heavy cruisers sunk in under an hour. Cape Esperance inconclusive. First Guadalcanal naval battle savage and costly. None of traditional advantages mattered against radar-directed fire, detailed after-action reports filed post-withdrawal. Survivors interviewed. Reports disturbed Japanese command, American ships detected and fired accurately before lookouts saw anything. Shells landed precisely in darkness and smoke. Evasive maneuvers failed when enemy tracked invisibly. Conclusion: Americans had technological advantage negating Japanese tactical development. Reports described blind firing yet accurate hits. Defeat not from superior seamanship but unknown factor, a game-changer. Japanese intelligence collected fragments, captured documents, prisoner interrogations, most knew only radar existence, not details, agents in neutral countries from journals and patents. No complete picture of integration effectiveness. Japanese radar research lower priority. Experimental sets built, but development lagged years behind American and British. Doctrine emphasized offense, not defensive search radar. Industrial limits forced choices. Precision manufacturing strained base. By 1944 functional fire control radar on ships, strategic situation turned. American production overwhelming, new radar-equipped ships monthly. Japanese yards could not replace losses, no further major reinforcement at Guadalcanal after Kirishima loss. Calculus changed, battleships high on November 13 and Kirishima on 15 lost in 3 days, heavy cruiser Kinagasa earlier, numerous destroyers, light cruiser Isuzu sunk. Losses staggering, irreplaceable. Capital ships could not be traded for uncertain gains. Operational objective failed repeatedly. Henderson Field operational, aircraft intercepting convoys, bombing positions. Marines controlled airfield and perimeter. Supplies reached daylight hours under air protection. Japanese ground forces isolated, starving. Losing to disease faster than combat, night surface combat became dangerous with American radar. Optical superiority useless against electronics. Aggressive doctrine needed revision, but time lacked. Strategy shifted defensive. Major engagements abandoned. High-speed destroyer runs adopted, Tokyo Express or RAT transports. Squadrons raced from Rabaul at night, approached Guadalcanal, threw sealed supply drums overboard to drift ashore, withdrew before dawn airstrikes. Minimal supplies delivered, insufficient for 17,000 soldiers. Campaign continued December to January 1943. Japanese fought courageously under hopeless conditions, starving, disease-ravaged, malaria, dysentery, infections killed thousands. Medical and food supplies gone. Soldiers foraged jungle, ate roots, leaves, some units cannibalism. American Marines, supplied via Henderson Field despite disease and exhaustion, expanded perimeter, pushed back. Late January early February 1943, skillful evacuation rescued 11,000 from beaches via destroyer runs. Success because initially mistaken for reinforcement, strategic defeat conceded. Japan lost 24,000 soldiers on Guadalcanal, mostly starvation/disease, dozens aircraft, critically 2 battleships, several cruisers, numerous destroyers in naval battles. American losses heavy but replaceable. Japanese not. Campaign ended after Kirishima sank. Marines held Henderson Field. Convoys safe daylight under air cover. Japanese evacuated February 1943, saving lives but total defeat. Japan never mounted major Pacific offensive again. From February 1943, defensive campaigns traded space for time, hoping negotiated settlement never came. Naval Battle of Guadalcanal considered Pacific War turning point. Pre-November 1942 Japan advanced, post-retreated, never regaining initiative. Difference not just ships, aircraft, industry, though vital. Decisive, radar integration one side exploited, other did not, Navy Cross awarded for actions November 14 to 15, citing superior radar use and aggressive tactics against superior forces. Another Navy Cross for ship handling and fire control coordination. Radar operators received no medals, no commendations in reports. Names on crew roster and casualty lists, 0 combat deaths, but nowhere in official histories. Fast battleships commanded 1943 to 1944, shore bombardments for amphibious assaults, carrier task force screens. New officers trained on radar tactics and technology integration. March 1944 promotion to Vice Admiral, Commander Battleship's Pacific Fleet for expertise and record. May 1945, victory certain, sent Atlantic for kamikaze defense research inflicting casualties at Okinawa. August 25, 1945, 10 days post-surrender, sudden heart attack in motor launch to flagship Casco Bay, Maine. Collapsed, died before aid, age 57. Obituary noted Olympic shooting golds. Guadalcanal Command, gunnery/tactics contributions. Did not emphasize first demonstration radar revolutionized surface warfare, post-war, battleship divisions commanded. Served Commandant Washington Navy Yard, Superintendent Naval Gun Factory. Retired Vice Admiral 1953. Civilian shipping industry work, corporate boards, technical articles on naval gunnery. Articles emphasized radar, technology possession nothing without training/proficiency, equipment not tactical exploitation. Victory at Guadalcanal from dedicated officers/enlisted mastering system while fleet distrusted, awaited instructions, radar operators returned civilian life, jobs, families, rarely discussed experiences. Operation technical specialty, not combat role for medals. Glory to decision makers, gunners, damage control. Number 1942 medals for screen readers calling range/bearing determining hits/misses, survival/sinking, life/death, SG radar from Washington at Guadalcanal in Smithsonian World War II section with period equipment. Placard notes use in Naval Battle of Guadalcanal, decisive victory, technical specs. No operator names whose skill/training enabled victory. Contribution invisible to visitors/historians. Innovation in war happens through dedicated individuals mastering technologies before revolutionary importance realized. Understanding radar potential when dismissed as novelty. Redesigning communications for radar data integration. Anonymous operators reading glowing screens, translating to targeting sinking battleship in 7 minutes radar-guided gunfire. Naval Battle of Guadalcanal proved information dominance new naval power currency 20th century. Side seeing farthest, reacting fastest, coordinating effectively won regardless numbers/firepower. Japanese learned too late. By understanding American radar, shipyards mass-produced equipped vessels faster than Japanese built. Technological gap became industrial, insurmountable strategic advantage, November 1942 uncertain. Pacific outcome either way. Henderson Field could destroy, Guadalcanal lost, Marines isolated/defeated, initiative to Japan years. Prevented not destiny/intervention/industrial superiority. 7 minutes radar-guided gunfire by skilled officers/enlisted mastering distrusted revolutionary system, like the video to share forgotten World War II stories. Subscribe for untold histories. Each matters, deserves remembering. Comment watching location. Community from Texas to Tasmania, veterans to enthusiasts, something special. Thank you for watching, keeping stories alive.